What's up, smarty people? It's KeysDAN with RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com, KeysDAN Show with an interesting fact. Well, 7 amazing facts about Alcatraz. Alcatraz Island, known colloquially as The Rock, was once the most notorious prison in the United States, located 125 miles offshore from San Francisco. The island saw Civil War prisoners in the 1860s, mob bosses in the 1930s, and much more. Today, it is one of the Bay Area's most popular tourist attractions, and an on-island museum tells the story of the prison's past. These 7 facts span the many ages of Alcatraz and reveal how it became one of the most infamous sites in American history. The word Alcatraz means pelican in archaic Spanish. In 1775, Spanish explorer Juan Manuel de Avila became the first European to sail into San Francisco Bay. He named the bay and its islands, including one he called Alcatrazes. Although the island's name was anglicized over the decades, its origin is widely believed to mean pelican or strange bird. The island was once a particular hotspot for California brown pelicans, Pelecanus accidentalis californicus, which was so plentiful in the 19th century that one French observer noted that when a group of pelicans took off in flight, it created winds like a hurricane. Although the bird's numbers dwindled sharply due to hunting and the use of DDT over the decades, the pelican rebounded in the latter part of the 20th century and was removed from the endangered species list in 2009. Number 2. After becoming a prison, Alcatraz was a military outpost. Although Alcatraz is known as one of America's most infamous prisons, its first official U.S. role was as a military outpost, with California joining the U.S. in 1850 after being ceded from Mexico 2 years prior, and with hundreds of thousands of people flooding the state. As part of the California Gold Rush, the U.S. military needed to protect San Francisco Bay. Alcatraz, along with Fort Point and Lime Point, formed a triangle of defense that guarded the bay's entrance. At one point, the U.S. even installed 100 cannons on the 22-acre island, making it the most heavily armed outpost in the western United States. But by decade's end, the first prisoners had been brought to the island, and Alcatraz played host to both Confederate prisoners and Union deserters during the Civil War. Number 3. Alcatraz was home to the first lighthouse on the U.S. West Coast. During the island's days as a military outpost, the U.S. constructed a lighthouse to serve vessels crisscrossing the busy shipping lanes of San Francisco Bay. Although the lighthouse tower was built in 1852, the Fresnel lens, a compact lens designed to make lighthouses brighter, didn't arrive until 1854. Luckily, the delay didn't cost the lighthouse the impressive accolade of being the first lighthouse constructed on the west coast of the United States. Sadly, the structure was damaged beyond repair following the catastrophic 1906 San Francisco earthquake. It was rebuilt, however, and still operates to this day. Number 4. Prison life at Alcatraz wasn't always bad. Alcatraz became a federal prison in 1934 after being transferred to the U.S. Department of Justice and the Federal Bureau of Prisons. It was designed as a maximum security penitentiary meant for the most difficult inmates in the federal system, and was partly an attempt to show the public that the government was being tough on the widespread crime of the 1920s and 30s. Although Alcatraz cut an intimidating figure, some prisoners reported that the experience wasn't so bad. The first warden of Alcatraz made sure the food was good to dissuade rioting, and a menu in the 1940s even included bacon, jambalaya, pork roast with all the trimmings, or beef pot pie and glaze. Prisoners lived one man to a cell, which wasn't a certainty in other federal prisons, and had basic rights to food, shelter, clothing, and medical care. Though good behavior, prisoners could earn privileges that included work on the island and even playing music. In fact, Alcatraz's reputation far surpassed those of some other federal prisons, and occasionally inmates around the country even requested transfers to the Rock. Number 5, Al Capone wrote love songs while an inmate at Alcatraz. Arguably, the prison's most famous inmate was Al Capone, who was known at Alcatraz as Prisoner 85. Although a ruthless mob leader who ran the Italian-American organized crime syndicate known as the Chicago Outfit, Scarface, as he was known, was finally put behind bars for tax evasion in 1931. In a few instances, he resorted to violence when provoked, but he mostly spent time playing banjo in the prison band, the Rock Islanders, and writing love songs. In 2017, Capone's handwritten lyrics to one song titled Humoresque sold at auction for $18,750. The lyrics included such memorable lines as, "You thrill and fill this heart of mine with gladness, like a soothing symphony over the air, you gently float, and in my soul you strike a note." Capone was eventually released from prison in November 1939 after more than 7 years behind bars, by which time he was in ill health due to an untreated case of syphilis. Number 6, no one has ever escaped from Alcatraz. Probably. Of the 4 escape attempts at Alcatraz, all failed, except one daring attempt forever immortalized in the 1979 film Escape from Alcatraz. On June 12, 1962, an early morning bed check at the prison revealed that 3 inmates were missing from their beds. And in a made-for-Hollywood twist, they had been replaced by papier-mâché heads, constructed in secret to fool the night guards. While hacking together a homemade life vest, an idea they got from the DIY magazine Popular Mechanics, the escapees tried their luck across the bay toward San Francisco. The FBI discovered the vest on Cronkite Beach and found other bits of evidence, including letters sealed in rubber, scattered throughout the bay. But the authorities never found any evidence of the men living in the U.S. or abroad, and believe they actually drowned in the bay's frigid waters. The FBI closed the case on December 31st, 1979, but the U.S. Marshals Service has continued to investigate. And finally, number 7, Native Americans occupied Alcatraz. One problem with running a prison on an island that it can be pretty expensive to maintain. And so in March 1963, the century-old military outpost turned penitentiary closed its doors. But that wasn't the end of the story. In November 1969, a group of Native Americans led by activist Richard Oakes traveled to Alcatraz and began an occupation of the island that lasted 19 months. The group referenced the 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie, which allowed Native people to repossess retired or abandoned federal land as the basis for their seizure. They issued a proclamation that included a letter to the Great White Father and all his people, which highlighted the hypocrisy of the U.S. government's treatment of the Native Americans, both past and present. Over the following months, the occupation grew in size to as many as 600 people before numbers began to dwindle in January 1970. The government cut off electrical and water supplies to the island. Food became scarce, and in June 1971, U.S. Marshals forcibly removed the final 15 occupants from the island. A highly publicized moment of indigenous activism. The protest brought considerable attention to the plight of America's native peoples. In 1970, President Richard Nixon even ended the U.S.'s decades-long termination policy, an effort to forcibly eliminate tribes and assimilate native Indians into American society. The occupation of Alcatraz was the first intertribal protest. I read that incorrectly. The first intertribal protest and part of a rich history of modern Native American activism. That's 7 interesting facts about Alcatraz. For more, stick around, KeysDAN Show. And if you'd like to tell your story or hear the stories of others, I encourage you to check out my other podcast. It's called What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. That's it for me. It's KeysDAN, RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com. Peace. I'm out of here.